The darkness of the night had wrapped the old mansion in its embrace. Dim light scattered from the lanterns hanging on the century-old walls. Outside in the courtyard, tall palm trees rustled with the gusts of wind, but even in that wind, there was a heavy burden. A heaviness that told a tale of blood and revenge. Aryan stood at the main doors of the mansion, his eyes red as if he hadn't slept for days. On the ground before him, the bloodstains were still fresh. Those stains were clawing at his heart. He felt a strange, suffocating agony because it was the blood of his younger brother, Zaid. "They will have to pay for my brother's blood," Aryan muttered, grinding his teeth. 26-year-old Zaid had always been a soft-hearted, innocent and forgiving boy, but it was written in his fate to die at the hands of a tyrant. In the prime of his youth, Zaid lost his life to the enemy tribe, a family they had been feuding with for years. The enemy struck, and Aryan had to watch a piece of his own heart writhing in pain right before his eyes. But the time for mourning was over. Now, there was only the raging fire of revenge in Aryan's heart. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind the doors. 2 maids forcefully dragged a young girl and brought her before Aryan. The girl looked absolutely terrified. She was Hina, the only sister of the enemy leader. Her white dress was stained with dirt and blood, her hair was disheveled, and her face had turned pale with fear. Her eyes were filled with helplessness, and her lips trembled, as if life had shown her such a ruthless scene for the very first time. Aryan cast a cold glance at her. His eyes held a strange mix of hatred and anger. Fear descended into Hina's red, tear-filled eyes. He was surprised to see this girl here. He thought the enemies would pay for blood with blood to save their honor, but Aryan's guess was wrong. To save their family's most pampered heir, those people had handed over their family's daughter as a compensation bride to settle the blood debt. "Oh, so you are my brother's killer's sister. Do you know you have been given to me as a bride of retribution? And now you will see exactly how Aryan settles the score for his brother's blood," he said, grinding his teeth in fury. I didn't do anything. Please let me go, please," she begged, her voice barely leaving her throat. Aryan glared at her. She looked like an innocent girl of 20 or 22. "Silence. Absolute silence. Don't you know that a murder is avenged either by a murder or the revenge is extracted through a woman? Your brother ruined my brother's life. He put him to death at a young age. Your family turned out to be so shameless that they handed over a girl to save their precious heir. But it doesn't matter. I will take my revenge in such a spectacular way that your entire village will remember it." Speaking furiously, he turned on his heel. The maids dragged her away and threw her into the mansion's cellar. It was pitch dark down there. Only a single lit clay lamp sat in the corner. Thick cobwebs covered the ceiling. Hina sank to the floor, tears streaming from her eyes. She knew this captivity would change her life, not just her future, but her honor was also on the line. She was trembling with fear. She was the princess of her own estate. How could she have known the dark could be so dangerous? She was terrified of spiderwebs, but here there was only dead silence, fear, and endless cobwebs everywhere. She couldn't understand why her family had inflicted this cruelty upon her. Burying her head in her knees, she broke down sobbing. Upstairs, Aryan stood before his bedroom window, watching the falling raindrops outside. But those drops couldn't cool the fire burning inside his chest. "Zaid, my brother," he muttered, looking far into the sky as if Zaid were out there. "I promise you, my brother, your blood will not go to waste. This monster of a brother will burn the enemy's tribe to ashes. Forgive me, brother. I know if you could talk to me right now, you would surely stop me from doing this because you always ran away from these feuds and fights. You were an educated, sensible human being. When you opened your eyes to this world, I handed you a pen," he murmured under his breath. In the sky, he could almost see Zaid's smiling face. "While I was handed a gun the moment I opened my eyes. That's why, perhaps, I remained an animal, an illiterate brute. Who would ever guess I have an MBA? He chuckled softly, a bitter sound. "My brother, you were born into the wrong family. Here, only guns work. The people here are animals, feeding on each other's flesh and blood. The people here don't know what respect is and what it means to forgive." He spoke while tears flowed freely from his eyes. "What they did to you, I will do the exact same to them. I know a woman should be respected, but my hands are tied, Zaid." He took a deep, shuddering breath. Down in the cellar, Hina's sobs echoed through the floorboards. She was crying bitterly, but she had realized this much. No one was coming to save her. She had to gather courage herself. She had to make herself strong. I am not weak. I will not become anyone's slave. Everyone has wronged me, but I will not let myself be victimized anymore. I will not bow down before my enemies, she whispered, barely controlling her tears. Yet she was still more shocked than hurt by her family's betrayal. You didn't do right by me. Not right at all. You ruined my life, my education, my dreams, my everything. But I won't let my honor be ruined. I will not do what Aryan wants. Never. She spoke as if gathering her inner strength. The darkness still terrified her, and the cobwebs were scaring her to death. The morning sun was peeking from behind the high walls of the mansion. The birds had started chirping, but the atmosphere inside the estate was still mournful. Zaid's memory lingered in every corner. Aryan sat with one leg crossed over the other, blowing cigarette smoke into the air. His eyes held the same wild intensity. He hadn't slept a wink all night. The thought of the girl locked down in the cellar was constantly hammering at his brain. The maid had told him that sobbing sounds had been echoing from the cellar since last night. She won't stop crying. I'll teach her a lesson right now, Aryan thought. He got up and headed toward the cellar. The darkness still coated the room inside. She sat leaning against the wall in the corner, her hands bound by chains. Her hair was scattered over her face, and her eyes were red from a lack of sleep and endless crying. Aryan slowly approached her. Are you awake? He asked in a harsh, grating tone. Hina looked up, startled. Please let me go. I am innocent. My family sent me as a scapegoat for my brother's mistake. For God's sake, have mercy on me. Making a desperate attempt, she started sobbing again, pure innocence scattered across her face. Aryan swiftly leaned down and grabbed her chin in a tight grip. Listen to me. I don't care if you are guilty or not. I only know how to avenge my brother's death, and I will do exactly what tradition dictates. He spoke in a ruthless tone. Tears began to swim in Hina's eyes. For God's sake, I am just a girl. Don't commit this atrocity against me. I will die while still breathing. A bitter smile emerged on Aryan's lips. Atrocity? I haven't even started yet. Speaking with pure malice, he violently jerked the chain he held in his hand. Hina cried out and fell at his feet. Her breathing became heavy and erratic. Remember this. In this mansion, you are just a prisoner. The sound of your crying cannot go beyond these walls, so cry as much as you want. Hearing your screams, the walls and doors of this mansion will finally find peace. After all, everyone should know how an enemy's daughter, a killer's sister, is paying the price for the deeds of her family's men. Writhing in agony, Aryan said in a cold, unfeeling tone. Hina pressed her lips together. Her heart was beating frantically against her ribs. She raised her head and looked at Aryan, and for the first time, her eyes spilled more hatred than fear. I will never break, she said with sudden courage. Aryan paused and noticed her sudden change in tone. You can imprison me, but you cannot break me. You cannot torture my soul. Do you hear me? At her sudden shout, Aryan was taken aback for a split second, and then he threw his head back and burst out laughing. Your soul? He leaned close to her ear. I snatch exactly what a person is most proud of. You too will soon understand what kind of beast Aryan is. There was so much cruelty in his voice that a violent shudder ran through Hina's body. He stepped back and, as he left, slammed the heavy cellar door shut. Coming upstairs, he stopped near his mother's room. His mother had been lying unconscious, consumed by grief for days. Aryan glanced at the door. Mom, I will take revenge for Zaid's blood, even if I have to become the world's cruelest tyrant to do it. I will break that girl's pride and I will cause pain to her body too, he muttered under his breath. Sitting in the prison below, Hina tightly clenched her fists. Her eyes no longer held tears, only a cold, hard indifference. If you have made me your prisoner, then I will make my imprisonment my weapon. One day, Aryan, I will make you a prisoner of your own prison. You don't know me yet, she said in a tone dripping with hatred. The night had grown deep, and the rustling of palm leaves with the wind could be heard in the courtyard. But in the cellar, only the clinking sound of metal chains echoed. Hina sat on the floor, leaning against the cold wall. Her hands were still tied, the moisture in her eyes and the sheer exhaustion on her face were clear. She hadn't eaten a single bite all day. She was lost in deep thoughts when suddenly the door swung open. Aryan entered holding a lantern. The light illuminated the dark cellar, and in that glow, she saw Aryan's tense, sharp features. "You haven't eaten?" Aryan said in a frigid tone. Hina remained silent. "I asked you a question, answer me!" This time he roared, causing her to flinch in sudden terror. "I will not eat a single bite from the enemy's house," she said, a clear tremor in her voice. Aryan's footsteps drew closer. He crouched down near her. With his own hands, he grabbed Hina's chains and yanked her face close to his. His rough action caused Hina a jolt of pain. "Enemy? You are a prisoner. Prisoners don't have a choice." Hina gathered her courage and looked straight into his eyes. "You can put me in chains, but you cannot make me bow my head." She spoke with her chin held high, and a bitter smirk appeared on Aryan's lips. He stared at her for a moment, then suddenly tightened his grip. "Do you think I can't break you?" he said harshly, his gaze dropping to her lips. Hina's breath hitched. She shrank back, but the heavy chains stopped her. Aryan watched her helplessness closely. "I can keep you starving and thirsty. I can leave you to rot in the dark. But no, I want to see you right in front of me, breaking, shattering, and stripped bare." He spoke, looking at her with a ravenous hunger in his eyes. Tears began to flow from Hina's eyes, but instead of lowering her head, she locked her gaze with his. "I will not break, Aryan." Aryan went completely silent for a moment. His gaze lingered on her trembling lips and shivering body. He leaned close to her, very close, so close that she could feel the warmth of his breath. Hina instinctively squeezed her eyes shut. That man could do anything at any given moment. But he suddenly stood up. "Fine." He jerked the chains, and she groaned in pain. "Let's see how long you stick to your stubbornness, because very soon I intend to take you to my bed and shatter your pride." Saying that, he turned, closed the door, and walked away. Hina took a deep breath, her heart pounding loudly, but a faint smile graced her lips. "Aryan, by imprisoning me, you are imprisoning yourself. Every time you try to break me, I will defeat you in my own way. Even if you take me to bed, you won't be able to do much. Remember that." A strange, defiant gleam had appeared in her eyes. He came to his room, breathing heavily. He wanted to torture her. That's exactly what is done with a girl brought as a blood debt bride. But he just couldn't bring himself to do it. Why couldn't he act like the ruthless tyrant he needed to be? "No, absolutely not. Next time I won't even look into her eyes. I just need to take my revenge on her, not feel pity for her, nor admit defeat to her gaze." He was trying to compose himself. What was it that was holding him back? He couldn't understand it. "I have to do something. I have to do something about this girl. Otherwise she will surely make me her prisoner. Why does she seem different from the rest? Why can't I look into her eyes?" He paced anxiously as he spoke, when his gaze fell upon Zaid's picture on the wall. Suddenly, pure agony settled in his eyes, and then in a split second, his expression hardened to stone. "She is the sister of my brother's killer. Feeling pity for her is a sin." He was planning his next move, lost in thought. He was definitely going to do something tonight. In the dead of night, the atmosphere of the mansion felt even more terrifying. In the cellar, Hina sat leaning against the wall. The chains were still clamped on her hands and feet. The door creaked open and Aryan entered. This time his demeanor was entirely different. In his hand was a wooden bowl filled with milk. "Drink it." He held the bowl right in front of her mouth. Hina glanced at the bowl, wondering what was mixed in it. "Didn't I say I wouldn't take anything from your house? Don't you understand?" she said in a tone shattered with hatred. Aryan lifted the bowl and took a sip himself. "Now you shouldn't even fear poison. Drink it quickly." Speaking in a cold tone, he brought the bowl closer to her. Hina tried to move back but remained helpless due to the heavy chains. Aryan leaned close to her. The heat of their breaths started mingling in the small space. "I won't let you starve to death, understand? The prison is mine, and even if the breaths are yours, the will is mine. Only mine." As harshly as he spoke, tears flowed from Hina's eyes, but she didn't let go of her stubbornness. I will not obey any of your orders, Aryan, even if you bury me alive in this cellar. Looking right into his eyes, she spoke, and along with the wildness, a strange, magnetic attraction sparked in Aryan's eyes. He looked at her for a moment, then suddenly smashed the bowl onto the ground. The milk splattered everywhere. This stubbornness of yours is truly making me a prisoner, Hina. This was the first time he had said her name, and he said it in such a way that she was completely startled. This was the first time Aryan's tone contained another element besides pure rage. But the very next moment, Aryan wrapped himself in harshness again. He grabbed her hair in his fist, pulled her close, and suddenly crushed his lips against hers. She instinctively struggled, but leaning over her, he kept devouring her lips continuously, so much so that her eyes started fluttering shut from the overwhelming sensation. Then, he suddenly pulled back. Hina's breathing was ragged. Both fear and anger were clearly reflecting on her face. This isn't just empty talk, Hina. This is my grip, which I can tighten whenever I want, loosen whenever I want, and with it, I can force your tied existence to bow down whenever I want. So be careful. Watch your mouth in front of me, or I will break you down so much that you won't even be able to stand. He spoke angrily, and she glared at him with equal fire. You remember too, Aryan. When chains break, they don't burn the prisoner. They burn the captor to ashes. Let's hope this chain of yours doesn't snap. At her words, a dangerous, dark smile spread across Aryan's lips. Let's see whose stubbornness breaks first, yours or my obsession. He stepped back, cast a lingering look at her delicate figure, and walked out. Hina turned her face away in disgust, though a strange commotion began in her chest. She had almost lost her mind at his touch. The faint morning light was spreading across the mansion walls. Everyone else was sleeping, but there was no trace of sleep in Aryan's eyes. He had paced in his room all night. Every second, the stubbornness and hatred in Hina's eyes spun in his mind. How is this possible? He muttered in disbelief. He held a cigarette between his fingers. How could she look into my eyes despite her fear? Didn't she feel even a little afraid that I could do absolutely anything to her? He was amazed. He took the last drag of his cigarette and quickly headed toward the cellar. The door swung open with a loud bang. Hina sat up, startled. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and exhaustion was prominent on her face, yet the exact same stubbornness still burned in her gaze. When Aryan came in, he had a glass of water in his hand. Hina suddenly felt like thorns were pricking her dry throat. Listen, drink this or you'll die of thirst, he said in a cold tone. Hina turned her face away in hatred. How many times do I have to tell you that I don't want anything? She hissed with disgust. At her words, he set the pitcher down and suddenly lunged close to her, making her shrink back in fear. This stubbornness of yours is forcing my hand, Hina, he said, grinding his teeth. Forcing? Yes. Why are you being forced then? Commit your atrocities on me. Test your strength on a woman so that I can be absolutely sure that my enemy is truly a weak man who takes his revenge out on a helpless girl. Her voice trembled, but her words were as sharp as jagged stones. Aryan froze for a moment. A strange expression entered his eyes, as if he was seeing himself in the mirror for the very first time. But the next moment he leaned in and grabbed a fistful of her hair. She writhed miserably. Stay in your senses, girl. Don't talk nonsense to me. My patience has a limit too, and when that limit shatters, I spare no one, whether it's a man or a woman standing before me. He growled in a blind fit of rage. Hina's tears were soaking her cheeks. If you want to break me, then listen. Break me quickly, or else your inner obsession might just pull me toward you. Because if that happens, Aryan, I won't bow down, but I will definitely shatter into pieces. There was something haunting in her tone. Her words pierced Aryan's heart like an arrow. He suddenly pushed Hina away, stood up, and moved toward the door without making eye contact. But as he left, he turned back and looked at her. There was a magnetic pull in his eyes that even tangled Aryan himself. Remember, Hina, next time, he addressed her in a low, vibrating tone. You will bow before me, whether in hatred or in love, but you will definitely have to bow. He closed the door and left. Hina took a deep, shaky breath and sat leaning against the cold wall. Just a little more time, Hina. Then this crazy leader will set you free himself. He knows I am the enemy's daughter, yet he is taking me lightly. Shaking her head, she looked at the pitcher of water. She stared at the heavy chains tied to her hands. Her condition was deteriorating fast. She didn't know when she would be freed from here to go outside. She didn't know when she would see her family again. She didn't know when her hunger and thirst would finally end. It had started raining at midnight. He was standing by the window smoking, lost in thoughts of Hina. Then, making a decision, he extinguished the cigarette and walked toward the cellar. Downstairs, the faint clinking of chains echoed. Hina was sitting on the floor, eyes closed, but there were silent prayers moving on her lips. Aryan pushed the door, its loud creak startling Hina. She opened her eyes and sat up straight. Aryan's sharp gaze locked onto her. "Still awake?" he asked in a low but firm tone. Hina didn't answer. She just watched him in defensive silence. Aryan slowly came closer, knelt by her knees, touched the metal chains, and then started unlocking them one by one. Hina looked at him in sheer astonishment. What? What are you doing? Why are you opening them?" A faint smile appeared on Aryan's lips while she remained stunned. "Actually, you know what? You are right. If I kept you locked up like this, I would surely become a prisoner myself. So why not free you from this cellar? What do you want?" he said while unlocking the restraints, making wrinkles of confusion appear on Hina's forehead. As the heavy chains fell away, Hina trembled slightly. Her hands were finally free after 2 grueling days. "Come, let me take you out of here." Aryan extended his hand, but Hina jerked her head in hatred. "I won't go anywhere with you, Aryan." Aryan watched her closely. Despite extreme hunger and thirst, this young girl had so much courage that she stood firm in her defiance. He grabbed her hand and forcefully pulled her to her feet. "This mansion is mine. Whether you want to or not, you have to come with me." She had no strength left to walk, yet that cruel man was forcefully dragging her with him. He led her from the cellar upstairs. In the large hall, the lamps cast a warm glow. The mansion's walls were filled with old family portraits, and among those pictures was a portrait of Zaid. Aryan stopped abruptly and pointed at the picture. "This was my brother, my own blood, whom your brother mercilessly slaughtered. Look closely at this picture, Hina, and memorize these features so that every single moment you remember that your existence is indebted to my brother's death." Aryan said it so harshly that fresh tears began to flow from Hina's eyes. She stared at the picture of the innocent boy who truly was killed without any fault. "I am not a killer, Aryan. I am innocent." The words broke from her trembling lips, and her tears flowed continuously. "Innocent? Yes, but the blood of your tribe flows in your veins. You are as guilty to me as those people." Aryan stepped close and whispered right near her ear, leaving her frozen, just staring at him. "If you want to torture me, do it carefully, Aryan, lest one day you also start regretting it, and then I will never, ever forgive you." These words struck Aryan's heart like a physical blow. He remained dead silent for a moment. Then suddenly, he gripped Hina's arm and yanked her close to him. Only the distance of their breaths remained between them. "Remember one thing, Hina. If you think that I will change my decision by falling for these words of yours, or getting fooled by your innocent face and deep ocean-like eyes, then you are highly mistaken. Remember, you are just an ordinary girl brought in as a bride to settle a blood debt. You hold absolutely no meaning to me." Hina's eyes held an expression of sheer fear mixed with a strange attraction. She stood helpless. There were no metal chains anymore, but Aryan's physical grip was much heavier than that. Speaking fiercely, Aryan let go of her arm. Silence hung heavy in the mansion's hallways. Aryan dragged Hina into a large, grand bedroom. Hina felt the open air for the first time in days, but even the taste of freedom felt bitter to her, because she knew that all this was entirely at Aryan's mercy. "This is my room," Aryan said in a cold tone, jerking her away and pushing her forward. "Tonight, you will stay here." Trying to steady herself, she turned around, deeply startled. "What do you mean? So the real punishment is about to begin now? What do you mean? No, please put me back in the cellar. I won't stay here, please." As she begged frantically, Aryan stepped closer to her. His eyes reflected that same dangerous wildness and attraction. "Perhaps you don't remember, so let me show you exactly what is done with a girl brought as a compensation bride. The captivity of chains was just temporary. Wait, let me show you." At his dark demeanor, Hina shrank back in absolute terror. Her breathing grew rapid, but Aryan had already grabbed her and thrown her onto the bed. Tearing her shirt, he bit her shoulders with his lips, and Hina writhed in agony. "Tell me, what else is done with a retribution bride?" She pounded her hands against his chest helplessly. Aryan pinned both her hands down with one hand and tore off the remaining fabric beneath her shirt. He now fully leaned over her, kissing the frantic pulse of her heartbeat, and she writhed beneath him. "Ugh, no, don't do this!" She wanted to push him away, but shifting from one side to the other, his rough kisses were turning her skin red. His one hand had effortlessly overpowered both of hers. She instinctively thrashed about. "Aryan, please!" This time her heartbreaking sobs broke out. Aryan lifted his head and looked at her. "Why? Looking at your condition, it seems like you must be enjoying it too, right? Are you not?" he asked, acting mockingly clueless. She looked at him helplessly. How incredibly cruel he was. "Aryan, please don't do this, you're hurting me." At her desperate words, he chuckled darkly and moved away from her. "You were brought here specifically to be given pain. But these eyes of yours, they are forcing me to imprison you permanently." His double-meaning words made Hina's heart drop to her stomach. "If I wanted, I could make you mine right now and claim every single inch of your body. But no, I will absolutely not do that, because right now you are too weak. You won't be able to bear my intensity. So listen to me carefully. Please eat something so that I can actually enjoy clashing with you, because the real fun is in a competition where the match is equal." Warning her in a deceptively soft tone, he stepped away. Hina instinctively pulled the thick comforter up to cover her body. A little later, the maid brought her new clothes, food, and some basic necessities. She still refused to eat the food, so Aryan was forced to order takeout. He was now placing boxes of burgers and pizza in front of her. She looked fresh and undeniably beautiful in a pink dress. She had finally taken a shower. "Do you think I will eat food bought with the enemy's money?" Her fiery arrogance was still intact. Aryan felt an urge to bang his head against the wall. He, the eldest, most sensible and mature son of the estate, the commanding leader of the entire village, was putting up with the tantrums of a girl brought in as blood money, as if she hadn't come as a punishment, but had become a punishment for Aryan himself. "Now what do you want, man? If you don't eat, you'll literally die," he snapped. "Then let me die. At least I'll be rid of a cruel monster like you. I'll be saved from sin." Hina retorted hotly, making him stare at her intently. "What kind of sin? What sin will you commit by eating food bought with the enemy's money?" He was bewildered. "No, I won't get any at all, but the task for which the enemy is making me healthy, submitting to that task will surely send me straight to hell just because of you." This time she was glaring at him, leaving him stunned. Was she actually thinking that far ahead? "So you want me to let you leave here safely? To not take my revenge?" Aryan's expression darkened dangerously. "No, I just want you to get me food delivered from my own home. End of story." Hearing her demand, he looked at her in shocked disbelief. Since she came to his room, she had been constantly irritating him to no end. "Listen to me, you haven't come to school here where I would order you a lunchbox from your mother." Now Aryan was genuinely getting angry. "Fine, don't order it. Let me starve to death, you hear me? Now don't bother me." She growled at him and stood up, but just then, the room spun. Aryan instinctively caught her before she hit the floor. Her face had turned deathly pale, and she had fainted. After examining her, the doctor advised giving her something to eat and starting an IV drip. Aryan knew that stubborn girl still wouldn't eat anything he gave her, so he sent a message to her house. Hina's mother sent food through a servant girl. Aryan stood outside the bedroom, waiting for the other girl to come out so he could go in and administer Hina's IV drip. He was pacing back and forth when he started hearing the sound of a conversation from inside. Because they were talking about him, he considered it his absolute duty to stop and listen. "Are you crazy, Hina? You found your love. What else do you want?" Hina had told her friend Rabia everything that had happened so far, while Rabia, who was feeding her, stopped and began mourning her friend's sheer lack of common sense. "Correct yourself. Not love, just a crush. Hina is Aryan's crush. I still remember the day I saw him outside my college, the way he was teaching a brutal lesson to those street thugs. I still had the video of him fighting on my phone. Since then, I had lost my heart to this 30-year-old man. But I never thought I would have to face him like this. You know, Rabia, deep down in his eyes, I have seen a soft spot for me. I feel like if he stays around me like this, I will inevitably fall in love with him." She was explaining, and Aryan, standing right outside the door, was completely stunned. The girl brought as retribution for murder was falling in love with him. "That's exactly why I'm saying, Hina. Keep yourself in check. Hold back your antics. God forbid Aryan gets angry and, in his blind rage, either drags you to his bed or takes your life." Rabia warned her strictly, and Hina looked at her with profound sadness. "We girls are so crazy, aren't we, Rabia? Reading romance novels, we think a beast will fall in love with us, and then he will start caring for us, he will accept us as his life partner. But this only happens in fictional stories. Mom was right. These stories tie false hopes to girls' hearts, and later when these hopes shatter, it hurts so much." A tear slipped from her eye, and as Aryan couldn't bear to listen to any more, he walked away. It was afternoon. The IV drip was finished, and she was lying on the bed staring blankly at the ceiling when he came to her. She wasn't even looking at him. Aryan held a small bowl of ointment in his hand, which he placed on the nightstand and gently took her hand. Startled, she looked at him. "You are quite delicate. Your wrist got injured just from those light chains." He was carefully applying ointment to her bruised wrist. Hina angrily yanked her hand back. "No need to do me any favors," she hissed. "There is a need. You are my captive." He hissed back with the same intensity, pinning her hand down and forcefully applying the soothing ointment. She just kept staring at him. "Since when have you had your eyes on me?" When he asked the question out of nowhere, she looked at him in total confusion. "What happened? Why are you looking at me like that? Weren't you just telling your friend that you have a crush on Aryan? By the way, if that is really the case, why were you fighting me so hard? And this arrogance, this massive ego, what does all this mean?" Aryan's rapid questions left her dumbfounded. He had heard everything. That's an old story. If you ask me right now, you are nothing but poison to me." She spoke so sharply that he laughed out loud. "I don't think so, because I knew at first glance that you like me. It's just your massive ego that got in the way. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have stopped me when I got on top of you." He spoke, leaning in so close to her that Hina's heart raced wildly. She turned her face the other way, breathing heavily. "Let's play a game. If I win, I will torture you as much as I want, and if you win, I will set you completely free," Aryan said with dark interest, his eyes trailing down to her neck. Her collarbone was beautifully visible. "What kind of game?" Hearing the word freedom, she suddenly snapped her gaze to him. "I challenge you. If you seduce Aryan, make him go crazy in love with you, and make me actually say I love you, then I will admit defeat and do whatever you want, even if you demand your freedom." A competitive gleam entered her eyes and she smiled deeply, but then suddenly her confident smile vanished. "Do you want me to commit a sin? Because I know in this kind of twisted game, you will surely cross boundaries." He smiled, a deep, knowing smirk. "Then convert the sin into a good deed," he suggested in a calm, smooth manner. "How?" She looked at him in sheer confusion. And then, at 6:30 in the evening, in front of the entire village council, he made Hina his lawful wife. The marriage had taken place with mutual consent, and this was the very first night Hina had to bring him under her control. Aryan had given her an hour to get ready, and she had prepared herself for battle. When he entered the room, he was absolutely blown away. She stood wearing an elegant, flowing red dress. Her curves were perfectly accentuated, and her fair waist was prominently showing. Her makeup was flawless, and her hair cascaded down her back and neck. She looked breathtakingly beautiful. Seeing him, she smiled with an air of careless elegance. He walked over and came close to her. Hina instinctively tried to cover and adjust her neckline because Aryan's heated gaze was directed elsewhere. She knew what he was looking at. "Remove the veils of modesty if you truly want to defeat me," he whispered huskily in her ear, pulling her in by the waist. "You're going to lose anyway, because tonight you won't be able to control yourself. You know, you will do exactly what you brought me here for." She was taunting him, looking boldly into his eyes, and he threw his head back and laughed. "That I will do, but actually, maybe you didn't listen properly. I told you that you have to make me fall in love with you, make me say, I love you." At his words, she stood frozen. What did that mean? Was this not just a one-night challenge? Would she have to offer herself to him every single day? This way, he would never let her go. This way, he would never say, "I love you," even by mistake. Aryan very slowly placed his lips on her neck, his hands pressing against her curves. Hina suddenly pushed him away from herself. She looked at him in total confusion. You tricked me. You will never leave me like this. You really took your revenge on me. You have imprisoned me now. Oh God, Aryan, you locked me in." She was in shock. She started backing away, shaking her head in denial. A dark redness began to fill Aryan's eyes. He stepped swiftly toward her, grabbed her hair in his fist, and pulled her intimately close. "Listen to me. The thought that I would ever love the enemy's sister, throw that out of your mind right now. I only know how to avenge my brother. The day I get bored of your body is the exact day you will find yourself thrown out of this mansion, do you understand? Now quietly let me do my job. If you try to stop me, I swear to God I will bring every single girl from your family to my bed one by one, and you know I am not lying." He spoke so fiercely that Hina suddenly felt absolutely terrified of this dark new side of him. She couldn't say a word because Aryan threw her onto the bed and got on top of her. Pushing the fabric of her red dress aside, he quenched his thirst with his lips on her sculpted neck. His intensity was such that Hina was letting out sharp, breathy gasps. He had already taken off his shirt. When her flushed curves pressed against Aryan's bare chest, both felt an undeniable fire spreading inside them. "You want me to love you, right? But why do you want me to love you? I am loving your body. This will give you far more pleasure, my life." He spoke haltingly while looking down at her, and his words were so deeply cruel that if truly felt, they would shatter a heart to the core. Hina's heart broke too, meaning he would only use her body. He would make a mockery of her very existence. She was lost in painful thought, but Aryan was entirely engrossed in his task. He was frantically running his tongue over her racing pulse. She began to writhe intensely, and just then Aryan laid her back on the bed, stripping away her dress and undoing her skirt. And right there, Hina felt like her life was slipping away. She wanted to stop him, but when was he ever in the mood to stop? Looking deep into her eyes, Aryan leaned over the hollow of her stomach and started loving her with his lips. He was doing this so agonizingly slowly that Hina felt the life draining straight from her body. "You tortured me a lot, didn't you? See now how I take my revenge on you." Hina instinctively grabbed his thick hair and gripped the bedsheet with her other hand. She felt her eyes rolling back. He was truly very cruel. Ugh, how cruel he was. He was draining her completely. Hina's sobs grew louder. Her breathing was shallow, but her heart was racing wildly. "Ugh, Aryan. Ugh, please. Whatever you want to do it fast. My life is leaving me." She spoke with such desperate intensity that she herself didn't even know what she had just said. Aryan paused, looked down at her, and then smiled a deep, wicked smile. "Whatever you command, my wife." Lying over her, he was satisfying her torment, but his manner, his touch, his passion, his raw intensity, the blazing heat of his body, and his burning frame made Hina feel as if she were in another world altogether. The passion of both escalated, so much, far too much, even more, and then with a sudden jolt, he collapsed on top of her, and Hina began taking deep, ragged breaths. He lay on top of her like that for a while, then finally got up and moved away. He looked at her with a smug smile. "So, did you enjoy my way of loving?" She hid her flushed face in the pillow at his bold question. He smiled deeply. "Hey girl, now you are the daughter-in-law of this house. You have to give time to the kitchen. Are you just going to sit in your room all day like a queen?" Broken by the grief of losing Zaid, Aryan's grandmother angrily scolded the dressed-up bride, and Hina was terrified. Just today she had stepped out of the bedroom to inspect the mansion, but perhaps she didn't realize that she was a girl brought in as blood money. No matter whose wife she had become, her status would remain exactly what she was brought here for. I don't know how to cook," she said nervously. After all, she had never done such menial chores in her own family's estate. "Hey, you'll learn when you actually do it. Go change out of these fancy new clothes and come help the maids. And yes, you will prepare dinner tonight." There was so much strictness in the old woman's voice that she hurried back toward her room in fear. Are you also scared of loud voices? As she entered the room, she heard someone's gentle voice. She turned to look and saw Aryan's mother standing there. Wearing simple clothes with dark circles under her eyes and disheveled hair, she looked quite weak and fragile. I am also afraid of loud voices. When I came to this mansion, I was also brought as a compensation bride. She stepped closer and shared, leaving Hina staring at her in shock. Was she also brought in to settle a blood feud? A little later, she sat in her room holding Hina's hand. She told Hina all about her past, how her own brother had played with her husband's sister, used her and left her, and then how Aryan's aunt had committed suicide, and how Aryan's father took her as a forced bride to seek his revenge. You know, my first day in this mansion, great cruelties were inflicted on me too. Aryan's father beat me with a leather belt, and Aryan's grandmother beat me separately. My son Zaid was quiet and gentle like me, but Aryan turned out hot-tempered, exactly like his father. But listen, he is not a bad man. I am sure he hasn't raised a hand against you, right? She looked into her eyes for reassurance, and Hina slowly nodded, because that was the absolute truth. Aryan had never hit her, never burned her. Maybe he called himself a wild animal, but he was no animal. So are these people still not accepting you even after all these long years? Hina felt a deep wave of pity for her. They have. Back when my Aryan grew up, back when my Zaid won everyone's heart with his pure love, and now he has left us. She spoke sorrowfully, tears streaming from her tired eyes. Seeing her, Hina felt intense anger toward her own brother. He was her stepmother's son, she already disliked him, but now she had come here to pay the ultimate price for his terrible deeds. But you, Hina, you shouldn't be afraid of anyone, okay? You just try to win Aryan's heart, because it is solely in a man's hands whether he demands respect for his wife from his family or not. Aryan's father didn't have the guts to demand respect for a woman. In fact, he didn't even respect me himself. But I have seen true modesty in Aryan's eyes. She squeezed her eyes shut in emotional pain, tears flowed continuously. You, Hina, you can change him. Yes, you just win his heart, and he will become yours entirely. He's a bit quick to anger, but he will settle down. She looked at her with great, desperate hope. Hina instinctively looked at her. What if he doesn't agree? She asked timidly. At her words, the mother smiled gently and affectionately touched her cheek. He will come around. You just focus on becoming a good wife. Whatever wrong he does to you, endure it. Give him love, Hina, and he will become yours. Her words boosted Hina's courage tremendously. Now she had entirely given up the intention of fighting for freedom. Now she had to fit herself into this family's home. He had gone out to resolve some village dispute. When he returned, passing by the kitchen, his gaze fell on Hina standing inside, sniffing as she chopped onions. He carefully looked her up and down. She was dressed in a light yellow embroidered outfit, her scarf kept slipping off her shoulder, and her hair was twisted and held up with a casual clip. Tears were streaming from her eyes, and Aryan smiled in amusement at her condition. Aha! We are working hard to impress me. With his hands casually tied behind his back, he walked over and stood near her. Hina glared at him once and then got right back to work. He walked up and stood directly behind her, peeking over her shoulder. The princess of the mansion, Daddy's only pampered daughter who never even fetched a glass of water for herself to drink. Look how hard she is working today for her freedom. Breaks my heart to see. She knew he would just keep shooting arrows of sarcasm at her like this. His brother had died. It was no ordinary matter, but Hina had to endure everything. Aryan's mom had told her he became like this because of the mansion's harshness, and if she explained things with love, he would understand. Hina stiffened her neck. Don't worry, dear hubby. After a few days, you'll be happy to see me in the kitchen too. She smiled gracefully, wiping her tears with her sleeves. At first, he just kept looking at her, then angrily grabbed her delicate wrist, snatched the knife and onion from her hand and tossed them aside, brought her to the sink, washed her hands and pulled her along with him. Aryan, what are you doing? I have to work. Where are you taking me? She constantly tried to free her hand, but his grip was ironclad. Bringing her into their bedroom, he pushed her inside and locked the door. What? What are you doing, Aryan? She became worried at his sudden, intense change in behavior. Taking off his shirt and throwing it aside, he leaned over her, twisted her chin, and looked deep into her eyes. You cannot imprison my heart, nor can I ever fall in love with you. I will just use you because I haven't forgotten that you are my brother's killer's sister. While saying these harsh words, he was trying to convince himself much more than Hina. Stop it, Aryan. Don't make yourself so cruel that later you won't even get my forgiveness. She shouted angrily, and he leaned into her neck and placed his teeth against her skin. Hina gasped instinctively. He knew this too, that just this one dominant action of Aryan's was enough to completely intoxicate her. He stripped her bare and used his full force, and she writhed terribly beneath him. Stop it, Aryan. I have to make dinner for tonight. She panicked. For now, just let me eat you, my life. He was biting her as if he would actually devour her. At that moment, both were in a state of pure intoxication. They had drowned in the high of each other. Aryan had forgotten that she was the sister of his brother's killer, whom he had brought as a retribution bride, and Hina was drinking his lips with full intensity for the very first time today. Hina suddenly threw her head back and began gasping for air, and within moments, her body collapsed onto the bed with a jolt. She began taking deep, shuddering breaths. You didn't leave me capable of walking. Breathing heavily, she barely managed to tell him, and he smiled deeply. Who stopped you? Come on, you make me incapable of getting up too. She hadn't even recovered yet, when lying on the bed, he pulled her on top of him and began to torment her with pleasure further. This time Hina felt an intense surge of fiery anger toward him, and their breathing grew chaotic. Aryan smiled a deep, wicked smile. Aha! You have a lot of passion, then why do you hide it so much? He teased, and she blushed furiously, burying her face in the pillow. Dinner was finally ready. She came from the kitchen to the room and heard the sound of the shower running. Maybe he had just come from outside and was now taking a bath. Hina glanced at his new clothes laid out on the bed, then wrinkled her nose, opened the closet, took out different clothes, and placed them on the bed instead. When he came out, he was wearing only trousers. She stood ready, fixing her hair, and turned to look at him. He stood shirtless, looking in confusion at those new clothes. What kind of joke was this? Where did the ones I laid out go? He asked, looking at her while drying his wet hair with a towel. If you wear the clothes of your wife's choice for one night at dinner, the world won't end, she said with charm, stepping close to him, touching his neck, and boldly running her hands over his wet hair and chest down to his trousers. Just then, Aryan grabbed her hand and stopped her. Taking revenge? Yes. You know everyone is waiting for me downstairs. You want to awaken my desires so that it becomes incredibly hard for me to control myself? He said, looking at her with deep, darkened eyes, and she smiled brightly. You're not as bad as I thought, she said, and walked out of the room. He stood there silently for a while, just watching her go. Hey girl, you cannot sit here. Seeing her take the chair right next to Aryan, his grandmother spoke harshly. Everyone stopped eating and looked at Hina. Aryan remained quiet. But I am Aryan's wife, she said very softly. Aryan instinctively looked at her. She looked so incredibly innocent. In this house, you are only a killer's sister, and you came in that very capacity. It was Aryan who married you. Otherwise, you weren't worthy of being made the daughter-in-law of this household. Get out of here right now. Get out of here. She stood up, screaming in pure anger. Grandmother, please, she is my wife, you can't just… He started to speak in a strict, defensive tone when Hina placed her soft hand over his. He stopped and looked at her. It's okay, Aryan. I'll take my food to Mom's room. She hasn't eaten anything since morning either, she said softly, plating her and Aryan's mother's food onto a tray, and walked toward his mother's room. To Aryan, she looked the absolute most beautiful at that moment when she was worrying about his sick mother. Everyone ate in tense silence. The food was truly very tasty. When he came to the room later, she had fallen asleep out of sheer exhaustion. He sat beside her for a while, just watching her breathe. She was right. He was becoming a prisoner in his own captivity. He didn't know why his heart felt so strongly pulled toward this girl. He quietly sat by the window, lit a cigarette, and took deep drags. Far in the night sky, he saw Zaid's smiling face once again. Ever since she met Aryan's mother, she spent most of her time with her after her daily chores. Today again, the mother had a fever since morning, and Hina had been wiping her forehead with cool cloths and massaging her hands and feet all day. She had gently forced her to eat and take her medicine, and until she fell asleep, Hina kept pressing her tired feet. He had been secretly watching her selfless actions as he walked by. He didn't know how that girl had made a home in his heart so quickly that he couldn't stay away from her for even a moment. His heart constantly urged him to confess his love, while his brain flashed red warning lights that if he confessed his love, she would win the bet, he would lose, and in return, he would have to set her free. He stayed quiet. He couldn't understand what he should do. That girl had won his heart by serving his mother so purely, and he had firmly resolved that he would never let her go. Family feuds never truly end. They run generation to generation. Years ago, they had killed each other's people, but since Zaid was born, he hadn't seen any war or argument. He was kept strictly away from these things. That's why he remained so carefree. He didn't know his one wrong step would ruin his life forever. "Get up, Reshma. End all this." Tariq grabbed Reshma's hand, shook her violently, and pulled her to her feet. Reshma was Tariq's fiancée-to-be. She too was an educated, brilliant girl with big dreams, who had met Zaid at the university and liked him very much. She couldn't even imagine spending her whole life with an illiterate brute like Tariq. When Hina's stepbrother Tariq found out about Reshma and Zaid, he murdered Zaid in cold blood, and since then Reshma's condition had been terrible. "I will marry you today no matter what, and if you refuse today, listen to me, everyone. No one will speak up. I will take her to my room without even marrying her." He roared in anger. At his vile threat, Reshma looked at him in sheer disbelief. What kind of a man was he? His own sister was suffering the punishment for his dark deeds. Every member of the house feared his violent anger, which is exactly why they had all acted shamelessly and handed Hina over as a compensation bride. She was getting ready to go to the kitchen when there was a frantic knock on the door and Rabia rushed in. She looked completely out of breath. Following her request, Aryan had allowed Rabia to visit Hina. Seeing her here in a panic, Hina was startled. "Rabia, you here? Is everything okay?" "No, nothing is okay. Your brother, he wants to forcibly marry Reshma. He says if she doesn't agree, he will take her without even marrying." She couldn't speak further, bursting into tears. The ground slipped from beneath Hina's feet. "Let's go, hurry!" As she was about to run out with her, Aryan walked in. "Where to?" he asked, raising his eyebrows suspiciously. "Aryan, Reshma, Tariq. Tariq is forcing Reshma." She couldn't speak any further and burst out crying. For some reason, Aryan felt a sharp pang of pain seeing her cry. He, who had fully intended to stop her, ended up following right behind her. He knew the place he was marching to was his worst enemy's house. "Warning! No one moves from their place." The front door crashed open, and Aryan entered like a force of nature. Before Tariq could even react, Aryan's heavily armed men had surrounded the entire mansion like a storm. She stood right behind Aryan. She walked forward with her head held high and stood in front of Aryan. "Let go of Reshma's hand, Tariq." She looked right into her stepbrother's eyes and demanded fiercely. Seeing her safe, sound, and much stronger than before, Tariq was left completely speechless. "Didn't you hear? Let go of the girl's hand!" At Aryan's booming roar, everyone cowered. The officiant who stood holding the marriage papers immediately stood up to flee. Everyone was trembling in absolute fear. "We have already paid the price for your brother's death. What are you here to do, Aryan?" Tariq shouted angrily. "To free Reshma." The moment Hina spoke, Aryan's men, at gunpoint, dealt death to all of Tariq's guards. Hina brought a sobbing Reshma along with her. "Thank you." He was sitting in the bedroom with one leg crossed over the other, scrolling on his phone, when Hina said softly. He raised his head to look at her. "It's nothing. When you are doing so much for me, it is my duty to return the favor. You served my mother, and in return, I helped you. End of story." He spoke in a casual tone, but she turned to look at him, pure disbelief in her eyes. "I didn't do any favor, Aryan, and I didn't do all that for you. I didn't do it to make a place in your heart, or to attract you, or to create a soft spot for myself in your eyes. I did it out of pure love for her. If my mother were alive, perhaps she would have advised me the same way, given me love, and shown me the right path." She said all this in a single, emotional breath. Aryan just quietly kept looking at her. Hina averted her gaze, took her place on the bed, pulled the blanket over herself, and went to sleep. Meanwhile, he kept looking at her for a long while, then moved forward and lifted her blanket slightly. Hina looked at him questioningly. "Listen, please don't do this. I will lose. I swear to God I will truly lose." He spoke with such raw intensity that she just looked at him like that for a few moments. "Go to sleep, Aryan. It's very late." She spoke in a very soft tone, pulled the blanket back, and went to sleep, while Aryan realized just how much he had confessed in a surge of emotion. He immediately placed a hand over his racing heart and turned to the other side of the bed. 2 months had passed, but in these 2 months, he hadn't approached her intimately even once. He was terrified that if he confessed his love, she might just win the bet and leave him forever. Meanwhile, Hina had built quite a lot of respect for herself in the eyes of the family members, so much so that even grandmother often called her for her personal tasks. Right now, she was in the lounge massaging her shoulders while grandmother was watching TV. "What do you think, grandmother? Is the daughter-in-law the villain here, or the mother-in-law?" she asked while watching the screen. Grandmother glanced back at her, then shook her head. "Obviously the daughter-in-law will be the villain. She's the new generation after all." She muttered while watching the movie, and Hina took a deep breath. She had watched this movie 10 times. That's exactly why she played this specific movie for grandmother, because she wanted to show her the emotional ending that happens in it. A little later, as the movie was about to end, she got up to go to the kitchen to make tea. After a while, grandmother herself came to her in the kitchen. "I was wrong. The mother-in-law did everything in it. The daughter-in-law is not always wrong. She was holding everyone together with so much love, no one valued her. And when she died, she left the whole house desolate." She was explaining, light tears gathering in her aged eyes. Hina was looking at her in amazement, and Aryan, passing by outside, saw a scene inside that was unbelievable. His grandmother and Hina were hugging each other and crying continuously. "I wish I hadn't punished you for your brother's mistake. You are so good. Even after enduring so much, you are trying to live nicely with us, doing so much for us." Stopping at the door, he listened in astonishment to the words of his grandmother. She who had never melted for anyone, melted today. "Forgive me, grandmother. If it had been in my hands, I wouldn't have let my brother commit this cruelty. Please forgive Reshma too. She only loved. And loving is not a sin," Hina said, wiping her tears, and grandmother affectionately touched her cheeks. "I know you love my Aryan too, so why do you worry? No one will throw you out of this house. From today, after Aryan's mother, you are the eldest daughter-in-law of this house. And Reshma, I really liked her from day one. I truly wanted to see her as Zaid's bride. Is it possible that she becomes my Saad's bride? Will she agree?" Hearing Zaid's mention, both Hina and Aryan were surprised. Saad was Aryan's late aunt's son who lived abroad. Saad had already said he would finish his studies, come to the mansion, and marry only by his grandmother's choice. I will try to convince Reshma," she said, and grandmother looked at her with hopeful eyes. Aryan quietly stepped away from there and went to his room. "What are you doing, Hina? How can I marry someone else?" The ground had slipped from beneath Reshma's feet. "Reshma, you can't spend your whole life mourning like this, right? You will have to marry somewhere eventually, so why not Saad? He is educated, he is the same age as Zaid, and moreover, look at his picture, he is a carbon copy of Zaid." Hina was telling her with bright interest, but she was just looking at her with blank, grieving eyes. How could Hina tell her now that she had already spoken to Saad? Saad had agreed even before seeing Reshma's picture. Now they were just waiting for him to come to the States. "What magic have you done on grandmother? What potion did you feed her?" He, who had just entered the room, stopped and looked at her words. "You secretly listened to our conversations?" She was amazed. He chuckled lightly. "The antics you are pulling, very soon you will turn me against my own family, and then you won't look like the one brought in to settle a blood feud. I will." He shook his head as he spoke, and she couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Who told you I am a girl brought as blood money? Neither was any cruelty allowed upon me, nor did I suffer a punishment, nor was I humiliated, but rather all of you have given me so much love here." She spoke, and pure happiness began to spill across her face. Aryan stopped and looked at her. "How will you convince Reshma for Saad?" he asked in a normal tone, and she smiled brightly. "That is Saad's job. He will do it all himself." She spoke with such calmness that he was left equally amazed. Another 2 months had passed. Saad had successfully convinced Reshma. It was their wedding reception today. Everyone was having a photo shoot done. Away from all the chaos, he was sitting at a quiet table. He held a red rose in his hand. His gaze went to Hina standing on the distant stage, wearing a stunning golden gown. Aryan took out his phone and called her, but she cut the call. A little later, Aryan received a message. "I am busy with my in-laws. Do not disturb me." He smiled instinctively, meaning he would just have to wait until she was free. Finally, those agonizing moments of waiting ended after 2 hours. When she came up to the bedroom, she was left amazed. Her room was decorated with fresh flowers, dim candles were burning softly, and he stood with his back to her. "Aryan, what is all this? These people decorated the wrong room," she said casually, but when he turned around, she froze. Aryan's eyes were red with emotion. He came and stood before her, the red rose in his hand. "I know that after what I am about to say, you will win the bet and I will lose, and maybe you will demand your freedom and leave. But listen, I have fallen in love with you." He took a deep, shaky breath and said, tears flowing freely. She just stared at him in awe. "I love you, Hina," he said, getting down on one knee and extending the flower toward her, his eyes lowered in complete submission. He thought Hina would snatch the flower and throw it in his face in victory, but nothing like that happened. Hina knelt beside him, gently took his flower, and without saying a word, hugged him tightly. He was shocked. Wrapping his strong arms around her, he was crying into her shoulder, asking for forgiveness. "I couldn't bring Zaid back, Aryan, but I will try my absolute hardest to keep this family united, end the mutual bitterness, and make everyone live with each other in love," she was saying in a soft, soothing tone. Aryan pulled her away from himself, captured her lips with his, and started running his hands over her waist. "Aryan, my makeup." She could barely say that much before he pulled away with a breathtaking smile. A little later, he was sitting on the edge of the bed with her, carefully taking off her heavy jewelry. They had both changed their clothes and were lying in each other's embrace. When Aryan dominated her again, this time she didn't try to stop him. A little later, Aryan's passions had reached their absolute peak, and Hina was writhing intensely on the bed. He had colored every inch of her body red with the sheer intensity of his beautiful obsession.